Welcome to Sydney Knife Show. This is Rosehill Racecourse. We've got a lot of knives here today and a lot of people. Let's take a look.
Damascus knife went to this lovely piece by Sean McIntyre. Well done, Sean McIntyre. This piece also picked up Best in Show. Thank you, Sean. Thank you very much to Darmsville for sponsoring the prizes and the Sydney Knife Show competition. That's a huge thing.
If I'm coming to a show and I'm going to enter knives into a category, I'm planning that knife and I'm building it and I'm trying to win. I won 3 awards today, and then this one has won a sort of a double award. This was picked as Best of Show, and I got to say, it was an amazing competition this year, so these awards mean a lot. Like, there was a lot of really great knives up there. So my area of specialty is mosaic Damascus steel. When I'm making a mosaic Damascus pattern, I want to make something that hasn't been done before. I like to combine really, really fine mosaics, very, very detailed mosaics, and then combine them in with a bolder mosaic. So when you look at my mosaic Damascus blades, I want to get the effect of waving manipulation in the steel and then be able to see finer details inside of that.
This is Mert Tanzu of Tanzu Knives. So he's a local lad, man. You weren't always a knife maker though, were you, Mert?
No, I wasn't. I was a chef. When I got in the kitchens probably 15 years ago, and first thing you do as an apprentice, you're asking your chef saying, hey, what's the knife to buy? And at that moment, my chef said, oh, just buy these German knives, and I used them. I'm thinking like, it was giving me calluses because the spine of the knife wasn't rounded. And I said to myself, look, I know what the final product's supposed to be. I just don't know how to make it. So I decided to take a knife course, and on my way back, coming back from Keith Flutter's course, I was saying to myself, this is going to be a lot more than just a hobby.
The rest is history. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Mert. Much appreciated. Have a good day, man.
Thank you.
Alice Phillips is one of the only guys I know, Australian knife makers, that's managed to get one of his knives picked up by a major manufacturer.
I designed a knife that I wanted to use for food preparation, measured up a bunch of apples and other various fruits and vegetables and went, I want a blade that long, I want to be able to fold it. Posted some pictures to the Spyderco forums. Sal, the owner of Spyderco, saw those and wanted to purchase one, and I thought it was the most important knife I've ever made.
Massive congratulations on that. And while we're talking about congratulations, best production knife. Tell us a bit about that too.
Yeah, oh, fantastic. Spyderco have done just an amazing job of bringing my custom knife to a production version of it.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
No worries, thank you.
This is Wayne Barrett from Wade Knives. This man makes some of the most beautiful stilettos you've ever seen. And that's not shoes, that's very, very awesome knives. You've just won an award for one of your knives. Can you tell me a bit about it?
Well, it's my first award after about 30 odd years of making knives, so I'm pretty chuffed about it. It's just a knife I made for a altar in a Knights Templar church.
What is a stiletto? Because obviously it looks like a very thin knife. It's probably made for one purpose. Tell me a bit about it.
Made for one purpose, which is rather nasty, but I mean also some larger ones here used for the artillery. Well, if you're being overrun by the enemy, you would see them coming over the hill, and although we've gone here, so they would pick up their stiletto, drive it down in the touch hole, snap it off with a cannonball, so that cannon could not be used by the advancing victory army.
This is Adam from Holtz Knives. How you doing, mate?
Oh, very good. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thank you, mate. So I know you for your steampunk style, for your makume and for your reusing of like cogs and whatnot and the movement in your blades and that. What got you into that?
I basically saw a knife maker called Van Barnett, saw his stuff, thought it was amazing, thought I'd give it a go. I got addicted to it.
And so, best forge knife. So you're not just doing this sort of stuff, that's a keyhole.
I was unexpected. That knife battled me the whole way and I had nothing but arguments with it, but yeah, it came good in the end.
What style of Damascus is that?
It's basically just random pattern Damascus, and to be honest, it's just made out of 3 offcuts of random Damascus. I forged it all together. I had no idea how many billets, how many layers were in the billet. Forged it together, did a ladder pattern in it, and let's see what happens. And it turned out pretty good. So it's random.
Random that you won an award for.
Yeah,
you can't do much better than that.
Yeah. And this is what I do after work. So make knives at work, go home, make knives. It's a bit of a sickness.
That's awesome, mate. Your sickness looks like it's doing well on you, is what I can say. Thanks very much for your time, man. Really appreciate it. Kev, tell us a bit about your knives, man. They're like totally different from anything else I can see here today.
Yeah, we're the only company here that's promoting stone technology, which is an offshoot of our survival courses. We promote moving into primitive technology. You know, people can be out bush for 10 days, 2 weeks. In those circumstances, that's when you really do need to start doing primitive things such as, you know, shelter building and trapping and things like that. If you don't have gear, you need to learn how to make gear.
What sort of demographic of people are you finding are going on these courses that are going to use it?
Honestly, ages have ranged from, say, 7 years old up to 83. We get professional people, we get special forces, 2 commando instructors, so we get everybody. A lot of the survival companies in the US, for instance, are very male dominated, but we go in the opposite direction. We have female instructors, and we really like to get more females on the courses. So, and Australians are more open to that type of thing. There's no macho sort of thing with survival or whatever, because survival in Australia is very real. It's not let's pretend we're out in the bush like they do in the UK. They never get out. they go camping and call it survival. Whereas in Australia, we live in a really harsh country. So the minute you're out in the sticks, whether you're in a vehicle or on foot, it's very, very real.
Looking at your knives, there's a very sort of organic-y sort of feel to it. Do you do all of this yourself?
It's everything is, single ownership, start to finish. I forge my own steel, I make my own Damascus and Sanmai. So I do a lot of things by hand, but I've got a rolling mill. And that's been a really big time saver just in terms of drawing billets out, because it means that I can leave my billets a bit thicker, which makes the forging of the tang a lot easier because you're retaining a lot more heat and it's faster. And then you basically forge a pre-shape by hand and then start just lengthening it out. So it's a lot of pre-planning. It's like playing chess, you need to know where you want to be in 5 minutes time kind of thing. I'm unable to make the same knife twice. Having said that, I'm always aiming to do similar things. They may look nice and fancy and everything, they're tools first and foremost, and as a tool they have to be aiding what they're meant to be doing. I've had people that come to me and say, my bench top is that height, my shoulder is that height, my arm's this long and my hand's that big. You're adapting a knife to the person that's going to wield it. If you've got someone who's 160 versus a 2 meter tall person, all the angles are different. So you make to measure.
This is Keith Flutter, and he's the president of the Knife Art Association. What sort of style of knife do you make? Or in fact, what's your favourite style of knife to make?
I really like making Japanese tantos.
So we've got one of your tantos here.
Yeah.
Give us a little bit of a rundown, sort of what's involved. They've got the makume there. You make that as well?
I make the makume. Everything on this knife I've made, apart from the silver manuki.
Really, really quick rundown. What is involved in making a tanto?
Oh, wow. Okay, forging the blade for a start, the heat treatment of it, the making of the fittings is sort of like a skill all on its own. The carving, as I said, of the scabbard, or saya as it's known. The wrapping of the handle is problematic as well. Everything about making a Japanese tanto is problematic.
So it sounds like there's lots more skills involved than making, say, a hunter out of a monosteel and then a bit of timber for the handle.
Oh, and let's not forget that in Japan, it's one man, one job, but I've got to do it on my own.
You're amazing too, we appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time, Keith.
Thank you, mate.
Awesome.
Creative Man started about 5 or 6 years ago. Bjorn Jacobsen, the guy that started the business, he's from Norway. Normally it's a rite of passage. The young kids, about 8 or 9, they make a knife. Generally they start with a knife kit, and so he went to get one for his young fella and he couldn't find one anywhere. So he started bringing them in from Norway. Knife steels, handle materials, all the kits, and now we've got the finished blades as well. So if you don't want to go to all that bother, you can still have the same Scandinavian styles, but in a finished product.
What I am noticing is something called curly birch quite a lot. I don't see that anywhere else. Is that something that's sort of from where Bjorn's from, or is that something that Bjorn's known for?
Definitely from above the Arctic Circle. The birch tree freezes every year above the Arctic Circle there and creates the burls, and yeah, so that's why they get curly birch. And it's the handle material of the Norse gods.
You are known as the Sausage Man. We've seen the hashtags. Tell me a little bit about Sausage Man, where it came from.
It was sourced out of a need. When you go camping like at Easter and there's hundreds and hundreds of people in a very small camping area, inevitably the young fellas that have their music too loud and to be rowdy, so I just cook up some sausages and take it around and make friends with them. And so at 10 o'clock at night when they're being rowdy and the kids are trying to go to bed, you go back around with more sausage and they're like, yeah, Sausage Man! And then they turn the music down instead of telling me where to go. So it started there, and then we did it at Ironfest a couple of years ago, and everyone's like, that is so awesome. But then I'll get the hard word like, well, you're not coming back unless you do that again. So Sausage Man was born.
Yeah, so I'm the owner of Everly Works, and we operate out of the largest Victorian blacksmiths, possibly in the Southern Hemisphere, maybe even in the world. So we run classes making the hammers that we're selling here today. We've got classes in knife making. We've got an introduction to blacksmiths class. We can help people build forges if they're trying to get into it at home.
So looking at these hammers, Matt, they're like pretty serious. You wouldn't make that with a normal hammer, right? How do you forge something of that sort of size?
No, we're pretty lucky. So down at Everly Works, we've got some pretty serious industrial machinery, fairly old blacksmithing machinery. A lot of it's been there, or some of it's been there since the start of the shop, which is 131 years ago. We're currently in the process of getting our large steam hammers up and running. So I'm laying down the gauntlet that in the next 12 months' time we should have a functioning 2-ton steam hammer. Probably a little bit overkill for these guys. I'm not sure that we'll be forging hammers any faster or any better, but they'll certainly be flatter.
This show had a lot of people through. How is it sort of in comparison to the other years that we've had here?
Yeah, really good. It's a great show. End up with the old sore throat from talking as much as you do in the time we're here.
So Kev, looking at your knives, mate, you do like a lot of hunters and that sort of stuff. Do you do every part of these, or do you outsource anything?
No, I do 100%. I like to have that ownership of my work so that if something is wrong, I'm to blame or I'm in control, however it works out.
Obviously, this is something you're quite skilled at. You've been doing it for a few years. Do you teach other people this sort of thing?
Yeah, I run classes from my workshop in Canberra. From beginners, come in, do basic knife making courses through to more advanced instruction. And I mean, I do the same thing. I go and do courses with other makers myself because, there's no way in the world you can know everything about it. And if you don't go and see what someone else is doing, you might be doing a good job, but you might not be doing it the most efficient way.
Yeah, nice. Last question, mate. Who designed your T-shirt?
Andrew Smith.
Yeah, it looks familiar for some reason.
Yeah, I think he's from Same but Different Designs.
Same but different designs. Show me the back, Kev. Thanks, man. Appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Right. Anyone in the knife industry knows that we can buy a lot of gear from Gamaco. Do you want to tell us a bit about sort of what you guys do and how you're involved with the knife industry in Australia?
We try and make it as easy as possible for guys to get whatever they need, from steel, handle material, grinders, forging gear, blacksmithing gear, leatherworking gear that we have over here. Whatever the guys need, if there's enough demand for it, we'll try and bring it in for them.
If I've never made a knife and I want to make my very first knife, what would you be suggesting?
Okay, I'd be looking at either one of the beginner kits that we do, or if you want to go one step above that, you've got bars of 1075. It's what we refer to as a beginner steel, not because of the result you're going to get, but more so the ease of heat treating. Keeps it simple for guys starting out.
And so I finished the knife and I want to make myself a sheath. You're the right man to ask about that, right?
Yeah, sure. Look, I've got a long history in leatherwork. The very first Sydney Knife Show we had here, looking at some of the knives that were here at the show, and there were absolutely awesome knives, fantastic workmanship, but a lot of the leatherwork side of things let down the product that they had. So I offered a hand where I could and information that I could to help these guys bring up that side of it to make it a complete package.
I'm with Ian Stewart here of Two Feathers Forge. Now, Ian's a little bit different to a lot of our knife makers. You live off grid and you make all your knives off grid. Can you tell me a bit about that?
We live in a pretty remote part of southern New South Wales. We've got a little solar system that runs our house. I can't run machinery on it, it's not big enough, so my knife making is all about doing as much as I can by hand, just with a limited amount of machinery. I have a knife grinder and I have a drill press. I never just build one knife because that's inefficient. I'll do half a dozen at a time. If you're going to light up your gas forge, especially with heat treating, if I heat treat with a Weber barbecue, it's and high carbon steel, you can do that. You just have to have a good temperature source. It's all about, I guess, creating a story with my knives, and part of that story is being off grid.
Because you do it by hand, I think there's a real organic sort of feel to it. And even looking at your sheaths here, they look very organic. Can you tell me a little bit about how you make those? They're cool. I've not seen that like that.
I've got a partner that she loves nature. And she said, most of what we actually need, we've got here. And my sheaths are a great example of that. This here was made by a wood grub. So he entered the piece of wood under the bark around here. And then as he goes underneath the bark, he chews and chews and chews. And he gets bigger and bigger and bigger as he goes, then until he pops out. So what that is the life of a wood grub. It's amazing how many people have said, oh, gee, your sheaths are really cool, so I'm going to keep going with it.
Hey, looking at your stuff, you do some really nice forge work and leave a lot of it with forge marks in it. Is that a style you sort of go for in your knife?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I love doing that because it's handmade. I celebrate my mistakes. It's unique, isn't it? No one else is going to copy that, are they?
You've got a lot of Damascus on this table, some really beautiful Damascus. Do you make your own Damascus?
Absolutely, always make my own Damascus. Yeah, because it's like it's a fingerprint, isn't it? Every hammer mark's going to change that pattern. Each knife is going to be different. But yeah, normally I do a range of hunting knives, fantasy knives, kitchen knives. I like doing I don't like doing the same knife all the time.
Oh, I totally understand that. Talking of fantasy knives, obviously we see Stormmaker.
Yeah.
Stormmaker here, no copyright.
No copyright problems. Well, that's a project that I've been wanting to do for ages. Ever since I saw the Murrill, I thought, no, I'll do that better. I like doing the axes, like especially for these sorts of shows, because not a lot of people are doing them, but there's a call for them. People are like, well, you can't get a unique axe, can you?
Well, no, unless you get someone to forge you one, and then you can.
Exactly, and that's it. That's the only way you're getting it.
We run probably 250 classes a year in all kinds of things. Knife making, blacksmithing, bone making, woodwork, leatherwork, a whole bunch of stuff. So we're really trying to provide an experience for people to come who want to do stuff with their hands. I think that's really important. Something that we lose in our very modern virtual society. We get lots of people that turn up and never picked up a hammer. And for them at the end of a weekend to have hand-forged 2 knives is an extraordinary thing. And that's an accomplishment. They go home and say, look, I made something that's going to last 100 years. How many times do you do that in your life? You know, you don't make things that last anymore. You start learning, you have this dilemma, do I spend my money on my gear or do I spend it on myself and my training? And so we try and have things that will stretch you a little bit further. When people collaborate and work together with other makers, they improve a lot faster than when they just struggle by themselves in their shed. So having people like Rodrigo Sofredo come and spend a week teaching people how to make keyholes, you can just see everyone jump up that extra level. It's something that I think very important that you keep investing in yourself and developing your skills as you go so you don't plateau out as a maker.
This has been Sydney Knife Show. Thanks for coming, and if you didn't make it, we'll see you next year.